All right, so we're live. So, good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight for our artist talk as we present what the landscape holds. Um, Tonight, we're going to discuss, we have a few questions about the exhibition. Um, it's been received well so far from a lot of our guests, um, local and, you know, off out of off island and international visitors alike. This show is the 10th iteration of our Double Dutch series here at the National Gallery Bahamas. For those of you who don't know, our Double Dutch series um, essentially is a exhibition where we take a Bahamian artist and we pair them with another artist in the region whose works either are similar or very different, and in this case, very different practices. And usually, what we encourage is these artists to have some form of collaborative experiences with their work, kind of cross pollinating ideas, thinking about the Caribbean, and also, some of the similarities and differences in this diaspora that we are a part of. So, before we begin, I just wanted, I'll give the artists an opportunity to kind of like introduce themselves and speak about a little bit of what their practices, what their practices are involved with. I'll let Jason start.
Hello, everybody. Jason Bennett, originally from the Bahamas. I currently live in Seattle, Washington, right now. Primarily, we're kind of dealing with how to describe this. I've always, I guess I've always labeled as a painter, but I've really come to realize that I'm just really more into drawing and just trying to understand with different materials where I can get my thoughts across. It's previously always been about environmental studies and understandings just within personal experiences. And now it's definitely moved into more of a understanding of societal, I guess, studying, just watching more and more time being spent watching other people within society's environments wherever you're at. So it'll transfer from here in the Bahamas to wherever I've been living, but mainly working with two-dimensional. This was a change here, but mainly working with two-dimensional materials. A lot of I don't even want to call it mixed media. It was always what you'd call it back in the day, but now it just seems like it's just kind of two-dimensional materials. But that's kind of my background.
Okay. And I know, David, you had to reconnect. Are you with us now, or?
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can hear you. Yeah,
Yeah, sorry about that.
that's fine. I'm giving you guys the opportunity just to speak a little bit about your practice, and yeah. So Jason just finished, so I'm giving you the opportunity now, and yeah.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm a multimedia artist from the island of St. Martin. I live and work as a lecturer in Martinique at the Visual Arts School. I am known for creating immersive video and interactive installation that can be sound driven, that can be based on tracking, that can be based on motion. I also did quite a lot of video projections on building, video mappings also. But what I like to do is create really immersive environment where the viewer becomes the actor of the scene of the work, and that the work actually unfolds as there's a connection between the viewer, the visitor, and the work. So yeah, my background is painting, photography, and random drawings, but most people don't know me for that type of work.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just dive right into it. I know one of the kind of earlier discussions that I had with Jason originally was thinking about the double Dutch and ultimately like what this 10th iteration would look like pairing wise. And through that discussion, I know he had a lot of hopes to work with you specifically, David. So in that conversation, we kind of like had this moment of me reaching out to you and me being familiar with your practice, and thus the show was born. And we have like 5 questions that kind of like speak directly to the show. But one of the questions I also wanted to ask was, how was it the experience working with each other? Um, was it was it difficult? Was it fluid? Did you think it was easy, or like especially given the fact that both of you come from very different pieces, but currently where your practices are, is kind of different. So I guess like briefly, or like can you discuss like if there is anything that jumped out at you guys in the process of this collaboration?
For myself, like that's why I wanted to work with David, because the work that I had seen of his was just like, wow, I don't understand how this is, I mean, yes, we all understand technology works to a point, but just the way he was using it was so interesting, so fascinating. Like, hey, this it's experimental, that complete hands-on, non, technological. Like anyone who receives emails from me and knows that it's really bad. And so to see that complete that void of where he's at, where I'm at, was the interest in working with him. Working with him, I thought was quite easy. I never felt like, I mean, we had, I never felt like we had disagreements during the process. We had different ideas and every, avenues were looked at, but at no point was it like, there's tension. I never felt tension. I felt ideas, like you were being challenged with, what about this? My experience, I felt that there was definitely an ease and a flow, even with, let's try this, we don't have this available, let's try that. I think I felt we were both eager to look at things and not just be satisfied with immediately, this is okay. It was like, no, let's try this other part, and let's see how this looks, let's move this around. But I had a good experience.
And David, how about you?
Well, I implemented significantly. That was the second part of it. When I met him at Fuse, the contact went immediately. And I never actually imagined that we would work together someday. Although I already had some ideas of stuff that I mentioned like that, but just not as something that could have been done like immediately. Um, I enjoyed. I have difficulty like working with others, and sometimes to delegate also when I have like large projects, because what I do is so in a niche that it's not easy to explain what I'm doing and how I have to build things. But with Jason, it was great because we over the year of discussion, on and off, we basically saw both of us what each one of us can bring to the experience. And the first thing I told him is like, okay, when I got the invitation from you, Richardo, And I actually thank Jason again for considering me as the second artist. I immediately told him, okay, I saw the previous Double Dutch, and I would like us to really do something together. Like the advantage of working with technology and sensors is that we can actually augment whatever is there into different levels of communication or knowledge. And it was quite fluid. Like the on and on conversation that we had for the year was really on a chill pace, just exchanging ideas. And when we saw each other at Fuse again, and I saw the huge structure that he created, it just clicked that okay, there's other things that we can add within the structure. And he was already talking about the cement bags and stuff. So I really enjoyed the process. I think it's today one of my best like working exchanging ideas, openness to ideas and finding solutions that I've had in my career until now. So I'm really actually looking forward to have more collaborations with Jason on different levels. It doesn't have to be with technology, but yeah.
No, that sounds good. And I know doing the process is interesting given um, the difference in the materials that you know is used in the show. Is a lot of tactile and a lot of software. I know in the beginning it's like a lot of troubleshooting, and it's interesting because I think you have a lot of persons that walk into a lot of museums, especially places where it's like interactive work, and they don't um, fully appreciate uh, the actual like technology and essentially the time and effort that goes behind the scenes as it relates to like a lot of these shows. And I know a lot of persons actually who came to this space had a lot of the experience was new for a lot of them, especially coming to a space where you have to take yourself out of this mindset like no, the artwork is interactive, like you are supposed to step on this thing, you are supposed to again like touch this wall for instance, even like one of the actual parts of the exhibit that's interactive, you actually have to um, move your hand across this space. And I think even for a certain amount of time, we actually had to get, um, we had to like entice people to go and like touch the wall and engage. And after a while, it was fine. It became like kind of intuitive, especially with more people like in the space. And the show's been basically up now for like over 4 months, and every single time someone comes in who's new and sharing their feedback is always like great feedback in terms of the experience they had and the ability to interact with a lot of the work. So as we move forward like into these questions, like these are some of like the ideas, I guess the kind of things that people kind of gravitate towards when they experience the show. um, One of the kind of like bigger moments obviously, so for those of you who probably haven't seen the exhibition in terms of like physically, you're probably seeing like images or whatever. One of the areas that you interact with first when you come into this space is literally this piece, this installation behind us with the cement bags. And then as you go through, you're gonna see a lot, this huge installation with cardboard, there's tarp, which interacts almost seamlessly with projection and lighting. They almost become like one, like organism. Um, and so a lot of the questions I guess we were getting, and the question to I guess both of you, in terms of like how did that kind of decision, I obviously we spoke about this, but for the viewers in the sense of how did that decision of cement bags, cardboard, um, and the meshing of them outside of just like your practice um, as main materials for the exhibition, like what symbolic weight did each of those materials carry for both of you, and even like having to interact with it, because you're not like, you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're not like the most tech savvy
No.
that guy, right? And then obviously having to work with David, who's like, you know, like this guru, like he calls like processes like they're like things, you know, you could just find in the store, and I'm just still trying to figure it out. So, you know, how is that for you guys in terms of the use of that material?
I mean, for me, when we started discussing things like the cement bags is a personal, idea that I brought up to him, is like to work with certain things to physically take up the space. And I think that was kind of part of the discussion in the beginning of, I have an idea, these are some materials I'm playing with, and we worked through that on how that would interact with his ability to completely take an entire space with projections. I mean, if you think of that, like that I was so enamored by to work with him, was he can completely take the entire space. So how do you create that structure, like you said, seamlessly, to actually allow it to interact and become one thing, even though, so that fundamentally, I mean, that's light. And then you're actually dealing with a physical object. For me, cement bags is something I've started working with. They're obviously extremely light and not full, and it's just that illusion of this tense wall. That's like they're not even they don't touch the ground. So if you're in the space, they're slightly floating. I ended up I've worked with concrete as a career for 30 years, a little over 30 years. And it was an avenue to opportunities. It was a stable job. It was, allowed a lot of, I guess, ease as you're moving through. I mean, that was in my early 20s, like 21 when I started doing that. So it was something that kind of just gave structure, and it was always there. It was always there that just allowed a freedom, as rough as the industry was or whatnot. And it comes to, the foundation, like literally the foundation. I mean, everything is made by, concrete in pretty much, the majority of all of our societies, especially here, and which is where I did start. And it's also, at the same time, the production of it is terrible. The actual making of cement, like nobody wants cement plants in their, actual kilns in their areas, but we all need it, we all want it. So this was kind of one of those starts of, an industry discussion, but it was just this encompassing thing where we needed its strength. It for me was like literally the backbone of my adult existence. It paid all the bills, without any concern. But to make it airy and light was a reason I wanted to play with that. Cardboard again, and then the cement bags is still another thing. I mean, you're getting into while they're empty, they're nothing. You don't think about them. And you go and get them when they're empty. It's like, oh, hey, you don't even realize it's like it's just this little bit of sack of paper, but. Playing with that, the cardboard was a contrast with that because it's, for me, again, observing a lot of urban existence in Seattle, Los Angeles, quite a few areas where I'm living. The cardboard became such a huge symbol of people living with it, like just that was their home, that was their bedding. And just looking at how much cardboard I had at my house strictly for shipping, for, again, which relates back to the cement bags, to the fact that I had this ease and backbone structure of life where things were, were there, you didn't have those concerns. So it was trying to play with materials that were both, for me personally, just a quick observation of, my usage of them and how they reflected on, seeing other people that were, so much struggle and so many other things going on at the same time.
David, any like thoughts? I mean, obviously you have thoughts, but like in reference the same question about like the use of like obviously meshing the different materials in terms of like the symbolic weight using them like in this exhibition. Did you feel like there was I mean, obviously, I think in working with this material, this meshing between this like technology projection with the cardboard, how did that feel in terms of the process? Did it feel natural? Was it like a breakthrough moment in terms of its use in this exhibition for you? I know you've done installations before, but I think specifically working with Jason, it's like the use of this, this everyday material, cardboard, and then the tarp and everything else.
It was interesting because Jason work is so driven using like ready-made materials, low-end materials that don't cost anything, that you can actually gather, pick up, things that people sometimes throw away and that they don't pay attention to. And me, on the other hand, the ideas that I had to sort of try to make things make sense are cost effective, because it's like so I had to find a good balance. And actually, what helped me is that the experience of having my home like damaged or destroyed by Hurricane Irma in 2017 actually brought awareness to certain things or details in the environment of an island that's been reconstructed over the years, but that will never be the same. So as the year went by, and after I saw the structure that he did for the huge installation for Fuse, I started to have inspirations about using like the blue tarp that can be also like symbolic for construction, so that there's a link with the cement bags, but also as a protection for homes that lost their roofs and stuff. And at the same time, I was starting to work on a video series about species that you see that you never that had a tendency of disappearing, and that you see now after the hurricane. And there are certain species of butterflies, certain species of birds, and everything started to click. That okay, on one side, Jason is using things that reference architecture, land, building, human intervention, and how could I, with the technology, maybe talk about more vulnerability with species that you could maybe no longer see in a few years, or that are actually being regenerated. So the whole balance in using the technology was to take advantage of the fact that it's moving images for like the Hawking sequences, moving images for the butterfly sequences that actually can generate sound with a certain program with them. So the whole balance came um, when we decided together to how to use the cardboard part to actually create this autonomous structure that works on its own but can actually react to the public visit. So things actually click there better as a continuation of the cement bags to this sort of entity that sums up a bit our global issues. So yeah, it came slowly by like random thoughts. Me visiting back my home island of St. Martin, me traveling back to the Bahamas and seeing certain things, and the whole thing just built up like unconsciously in a way that it makes sense. I really wanted to like most people, at least in the French Caribbean, sometimes consider my work as being decorative, or they don't really know the meaning behind of it because like it's quite pretty sometimes. And I wanted to make sure that every choice or decision that we make together have a meaning in the global scope of us being Caribbean, and in the broader what's going on in the broader world also.
Yeah, and I remember during the install, because this was like, how long was this? Like about
2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2 weeks in this ballroom, kind of like going through things, figuring out positioning, like because in the curation and the direction and the building out of the space, we really wanna kind of not necessarily box people, but give people like a clear way of navigating. And a part of that process was also figuring out how best people like would engage the space and interact, how they would interact, whether it would just be touch or sound, or just lights, or and in that process, um, we spoke about like activation, and essentially you both spoke about that in terms of like how people engage, how people activate different aspects of the work, and in this space it's tactile, and that tactileness also engages sound, in terms of volume, in terms of projections, and different patterns with the lights. Um, and probably like answered this already in terms of like the actual space, but do you think this whole experience in this installation, how important was in that interface, that connection with people? Do you think the exhibition would have been the same if people weren't allowed to engage in the same way?
Not at all. I mean, the whole time we were working on it, because again, it was 2 weeks. There was an idea, but I think we were both very open to, once we got here, it's like there's an idea, but we were both free to. We weren't stuck with it on either end. If we have to move something, we can move it. If we have to, we were willing to change everything, to the point where it's like, hey, maybe this can be the flow all the way around the back of the cement. It was continuously changing with the viewer and the interaction in mind. If you just saw, that said, when you come in the room and you don't actually hit some of the interactive parts, it's still, I've sat here and enjoyed the piece every time, because it's always a little bit different each time you come in. It was meant to be enjoyable visually, aesthetically at that point, but only for you to want to come in and get closer and really see what is happening. It would not be as effective without the viewer, because the sounds change. You realize, like, hey, it's like I'm part of solution and or problem with all of the discussions that are going on within the details of the materials. Yeah, if it was just visually going, I don't think it would be the same at all. It's like it especially when you got to the last piece, the last section. I don't view it as pieces. I mean, we've always just kind of seen it as it was just one piece with different discussions as you went through. No, it's completely reliant on different interaction, and it also seems to work better with multiple people, because then opening night, you could see someone standing and realizing what else is happening, and then looking back at what's changing in their section of the piece, and then so it was just seeing that, which seemed to get people more interactive with even themselves, and starting to talk more about the different elements, because they're realizing what they're changing. And then still, sometimes you would still see people come and sit at rest and just kind of let it all settle down and then have a little moment to reflect on that part, and see it again without their effect on it. But to me, yeah, it was completely driven around people interacting. That was you know basically the main goal, or the main success. To have them alter the piece.
And
Yeah, the piece was built like when I was working on the while Jason was actually building the main structure in the middle with the lights. I had the impression, different impressions. I was like, okay, how could we give the public the impression of seeing the leaves blowing in the wind? How can we give them the impression as we they're sitting on a rock next to close to the sea and seeing like the small fishes underwater? How can with this technology and cardboard, how can we bring back something that's familiar from nature, although we are using like technology and construction material and transportation material? So the the piece could actually work pretty well, as Jason mentioned, with people just sucking in, taking in all the calmness and stillness from the piece when they're not interacting. And but it was also meant to surprise you, as when sometimes wind does build up in a field, it comes out of nowhere and just builds up and take you somewhere else. So in all the subtleties of the work, um, I think I really had in mind to recreate something that's familiar, although it can seem abstract and figurative at the same time. But the emotion that I was trying to convey with the sound, the choice of the sound, the different layers of sound when different people interact with the piece at the same time, that has to match. That's not something that's quite easy, and you have to be really cautious of that. But the whole idea was to, okay, how how can we transport you in a time where these elements are actually surrounding you, if you take the time to look at them beyond the architecture, beyond the industrial part of things? How can this piece help you also reconnect to nature in a certain way, or to the Caribbean landscape? So having the public engaging with the piece is actually helping them to, well, in a metaphor way, reconnect with their surroundings, with details in their surroundings that they don't pay attention to, that are so familiar that they just don't acknowledge them, but that actually become important when there's a disaster happening. So with the interaction, I think that was really the aim, to be borderline between something that's familiar, unfamiliar, new, but yes, yet that speaks to something in the mind or in the unconsciousness of people.
speaking again with that like level of interaction, I know a part of that experience too was also the realization that like no one experience will be the same experience, because as you come into the space, even if you've engaged like one of the parts like several times, like it will never be like the exact same kind of like mode you're going in, especially if it's multiple people. The light pattern would be different, the projector in the back would be different, even like the way the sound engages at area, because there's various sound points as well. So, and even especially like the interactive wall, the way people engage with the wall, the shapes, the kind of like the organic nature of it is just like never really like a one-time experience. It's like multiple experiences, layered on top. I can't tell you the amount of times like I've come in here like with guests in here and I did the little like trick that made like the fish and then they spent like 10 minutes trying to get like the fish or trying to figure out the pattern or whatever. So I think for a lot of people and it kind of connects back to that one of the kind of like original kind of like concepts with the double dutch was like that idea of play, that idea of experimentation and collaboration to the point where like you have a lot of these elements, the work kind of like meshes together, which I think this show did well. And I'm not saying that because I like curated it and whatever, but in terms of like the engagement was just full on like one fluid thing, you know. And I think we kind of had to break a lot of people's expectations or mindset when they engage like the exhibitions as well. Because like I said before, like a lot of times people engage exhibitions, even interactive ones, with a lot of hesitation. This idea of like, oh, I'm not supposed to do this, I'm not supposed to do that. Like even behind the space, the amount of people that won't even go behind the work.
Right, and we were allowing that. It was just like
Exactly,
we made sure there's enough space. It's like
So
because
you
it's that's a portal to come in. We knew that it's like you're allowed to get so close and everyone's so don't touch touch that it was exciting to like push that edge to get it right to that because it is supposed to be slightly playful. We want you want a new somebody not necessarily new to art or whatever, to these experiences, but someone you want people to come in and at least be like, all right, I am intrigued. The very first people we showed it to when we went live was a couple from Kansas that were on a cruise ship and it wasn't open, but they had just kind of come in the door and we're like, you know what? Everything's up and running. David said, you get to actually go first. And they just, everything, they were so enamored by everything because it just visually brought them in to then start to find out what was actually happening and, asking, a million questions to describe all the elements. But just the aesthetics of it got them interested to understand what it was instead of just looking at something and then just kind of moving on, as opposed to somebody who comes to the museum like I am coming to look at art and coming to understand it, I thought that worked pretty well.
Yeah, and one of the interesting bits, in thinking about participation in terms of interaction, is that it's amazing how the space changes when the lights are like fully, when you're immersed in it, and you feel like, not to be like philosophical, but like the darkness kind of envelops you, and the light almost is this thing that kind of like engages your way around. Because for those of you who've come into the space, like with little interaction, and I think we have like a video up, like it's really dark, and that image you're seeing is actually with someone engaging the light. So it's almost like to find a way through, you have to engage, almost like go through the space, which in its own right is kind of like this way of experiencing the actual piece. You can't just walk through and then walk out. You just, I don't think you'll do it justice. And even like the use of, again, the tarp and these familiar materials that people kind of connect with the region. And that kind of moves into like the next question as it relates to when we think about development, tourism, and we both spoke to environmental vulnerability and just in general, as it relates to the use of cardboard in different environments, what cement, like that idea of the cement in use in development as well, especially, for instance, in our case, the Bahamas being like, the number one industry being tourism. And obviously you can't build a hotel, you can't build most of these resorts without some form of cement behind that. And kind of like what does that mean specifically to us and like the wider Caribbean, in terms of that relationship? Like, how do you see this show kind of like connecting to that?
I mean, like you say, the materials, in my case, for the physical aspect of the materials, I see them, it's, again, I kind of touch on this, and this is something where a lot of my practice is, where I'm dealing with is there's certain things that are, even if you focus on the discussion on the region, the more I'm around, the more I realize how much it's just everything is global. And just kind of dealing with that. In the region specifically, yes, like you say, the hotels, everything has to be built structured, but that's just everywhere. Like, we do not build, not on the regular, not, I haven't seen a bunch. Everything is going to be concrete if we're going to have we have a certain level of guests that have to have a certain level of AC. I've been to many places where no, AC is not in the hotel room. And that's fine because because that's just, that's the deal. But, I think the idea, the structure, the fact that everything is off the ground, nothing, it becomes precarious. So I guess in that sense, you could kind of think of everything like that in regards to industry, just, the way all of the societies are, everything is in this kind of state of you don't know what's happening with it. It can all just alter at any given time. Even though it's supposed to be in the case of the cement, whatever, it's all it's supposed to be foundation, it's supposed to be strength, and it is, but at the same time, one storm away and then everybody's world is rocked, and then it takes how long to get that sorted out. I was hoping that things would look, and I think it does. It does give you a chance to see these materials or to see the space, as alive, which, again, goes back to this is the industry today. This is how things are today. I remember what it was, years ago, and seeing how all of the interactions from all of the countries, in the Caribbean, and maybe it's just because you've gotten old, you get older and you see more people or whatever, but it's seeing unification on that as a group. And then again, I'm seeing things where I see people as individuals unifying all over, as we all seem to be like upset with certain things that you see all throughout the world. You know what I mean? It's like, again, I just see all of these materials as globally unifying. Yes, it's hard for me again because, I see the region, but I see the region as it's completely tied to everywhere, in the world at the same time. I don't think that really answers the question, but that's just how I've always felt with this, with the processes, with this, and with David, who was detailing, a lot of times as we were talking, I was learning a lot about like how he was feeling about like, specifically this hurricane, these things, and how it related, and I just seemed to keep floating to this, this, I just see everything connected even outside of it, so I'm learning a lot from that. But so in my case, I hope everyone can see like the tarp was one where, and we talked about this, where it's not just a regional thing, that's everywhere. Like when that storm comes, I don't care how nice your house is or where your house is, everyone's rolling the tarp. And there's, whether you're in this Florida, anywhere, Jamaica, everywhere you go, it's like a unifier. Yeah. So it's just kind of like I view these things as
the blue tarp.
I don't care where you go, that's gonna be on everybody's scenario. So that, like I say, that was one of those things, as far as, but it is, here, yes, it would be more regional, I guess, as we're looking at it specifically, but, I still see it doing that unification.
Any thoughts, David? I know you spoke about it, especially thinking about, so one of the actual like imagery, it's a couple like short loops. It's showing like the actual course of an hurricane, like a couple of the videos that kind of, I guess, touches on the whole environmental vulnerability, but like your thoughts as well, like in terms of the, I know we spoke about it earlier, like specifically, but I don't know if you had any more thoughts about the show connecting directly to, well, in your case, like Saint Martin, Martinique, in terms of the materials, again.
Um, Actually, what I like with the show and the fact that it's like on for 6 months is that when you look at the actual like the news now, you see that in the Philippines there's like an earthquake, but then there's a tsunami. You see in Mexico there's other things. You will see in, in South Asia there's, and as time goes by, we see how the show connects to previous events that we've all witnessed or lived, and how it's actually connecting to this ongoing situation worldwide. Um, and in that sense, I'm really proud that we managed to pull this off, although all the setbacks and the intense work and stuff, because it really makes sense. Like it's for me one of my like work and collaboration that really makes sense with all that's going on in the world beyond us as Caribbean islands, but actually are being impacted brutally by what's happening also in the rest of the world. And we can see this also with the sargassum, um, that we don't see it in that specific video, but we do see when you draw on the wall those shapes. Some of those shapes are a mixture of fish nets, lines, and sargassums, plants and stuff to try to bring even that awareness to visitors that come from cruise ships or visiting the Bahamas that don't live there, that this is actually our reality in this region. So yeah, I think the materials help us connect to, as Jason said, to what's going on beyond, because most of what we have or we use is imported. I think there's a little things that we create ourselves in our islands, and we are so dependent of like the the flux of those cargo ships and stuff. So I was thinking the other day that basically I went to the like on sorry for the example. I went to the grocery store recently, and I was like, oh, there's no more like yogurt, and I was like, yep, yogurt is important because there's a blockage with the cruise ships, and so what are the alternatives? So I'm just taking that small, like, detailed example just to say that sometimes we get used of certain things, certain elements of comfort that become sometimes necessity, even though we do pay the price because they are way more expensive than they could be in the US or in France. But the use of those materials that we use in the exhibition actually reflects on all those transportation routes, all those negotiation and territories. I was thinking also when with a blue top with a hurricane, I don't know why I did a connection to those U.S. government ships that are actually in our Caribbean region. I have no idea why I connected to them. I don't know if it's because of, okay, in case of emergency, in case of another Category 5 or beyond hurricane, are those ships there also to assist or bring help, or just witness us being in a situation, and for political reasons just like leave us to ourselves as we are accustomed of doing. So yeah, as the months go by, I'm like, okay, this show really makes sense to politically, with politics and geopolitics also. I found that it really it makes me grow more as an artist, that usually work more about like environmental issue elements, but in a seductive, beautiful way, and it connects me to the harsh reality of what's actually going um, on the everyday situations.
The mashing of the two materials, like in terms of the technology, the software versus hardware, the cardboard, um, thinking about like materials we need every day for like literal shelter and protection as well. Like same thing with cement and tarp and everything else, and even trade. Like cardboard is like imported and exported so many different places. I think one of the main things that Jason was saying, like it's so easy to get, but even in getting it, this is material that like holds up. Even discussing like the actual labor involved in like creating
Production,
the
yeah.
production, not just in the cardboard on an industrial level, but to transform it into this installation, right? And then just creating this massive piece that takes up space, just like cardboard in other spaces. And in many of our like in the region, a lot of places don't even have like a recycle plant for like this material. So thinking about all that as well is like interesting in the formation of the show.
I think that, and that's a. So I live 30 miles east of Seattle right now, and I think that's an interesting misnomer that a lot of people have, that like all of America recycles. Like they see that, and it's absolutely not true. So like you go east to a certain point, you get to a rural area, and
It's just like
they don't have to. Yeah, yeah. No, I mean that they have. So it's one of those things where it's like, it is here, it is here, it is here, but in a lot of places it's not. That's obviously changed, but it's one of those, where we think of it. It's not here because it's not it's cost prohibitive for people. It's like we're not going to put it back on a boat and ship it out. But and it's the same thing. It's like, well, we're not spending our time to truck that back. So it's like another one of those kind of equalizes. I'm thinking to what David was just saying about, like, hey, maybe we don't have the yogurt here. We're on this island, but yet we've got a LiDAR radar and some really sophisticated projections
Yeah.
that are going on at the same time. So it's that, that we're living in all of those worlds at the same, and they're all a reality to us. And I think we're just more comfortable with it when you come from here, especially, at our age, where it's like, power was off. You were used to that, no biggie. And it's much better. You've made progressions with that. But I think that's another one of these underlying parts here where you have all the technology, but yet we know the reality of what goes on. And as I gotten older and lived further places, it's not just here. There's so many things that are happening. Yeah, and it's like, okay, that might be great here in this part of that city, but you go over here and things are not exactly what everyone thinks it is all the time.
Yeah, and even like aesthetically, thinking of the aesthetics of the show, like just in its like I guess raw form, you could look at a lot of the materials and even seeing you guys work and coming in and out of the space, especially in production and even like with the lights on. Crazy enough, like you get a whole different engagement with the work. Um, and for some people, I even thought of like, and one of the questions like speaks to that, this idea, this tension, between one thinking about, what's behind us, like this cement wall, like, these cement bags being this pillar that's also supposed to be strong, but also fragile at any moment, this could all crumble together. The actual like rough nature of dealing with the cardboard, and then the imagery with the hurricane and the hurricanes images, the loop images, and then juxtaposing that with like this soft nature of the lights and the projections, and then also a lot of people had comments, especially about like the use of like the butterfly and that kind of like the soft like nature side to like this structure that's supposedly that gives people like this tension. Um, so like in terms of like the sensory elements, did you guys think about like balancing that, like in terms of this collaboration? Because again, the entire piece is just an installation. Like it's hard for me to kind of be like, hey, this is Jason and this is David. Obviously, you guys worked on this together and kind of tweaked it out. So did you feel like there was a it feels like there was a lot of consideration with that, like this balance between um, the visuals in the work and then people engaging it, like for instance, even stepping on the first part, like the sound goes from this very like mellow straight tone and then it goes up like almost like 3 octaves, or in terms of technology like super high, almost to the point where like if you're anywhere in around the gallery, you hear it go up, right? And then that changes exactly as you move, and then you move to the middle one. The lights kind of go from its own thing doing its thing, and then it kind of like beats with you standing on it, and then again, the last element that incorporates both the sound and that imagery, but that imagery is very different from your first engagement. And then again, thinking about all three of those things being engaged at the same time, it's like a whole different experience. So was there consideration for like this balance or balancing act, or is the idea that it is no balance?
In my opinion, like I say, when you called and said, "Hey, who do you want to work with?" and I had just met David, like just not too long before that, to me, it made so much sense to work with someone using, and it wasn't just projection. It was the interactive projection was the main thing that I saw, and it was just such a different idea. Yeah, so all I could see was no matter what I did in a physical space, because I was looking at his different projects and it was amazing. It's like, oh, you can really just command an entire space. Well, in this case, it's like a blank canvas where you're creating the specific space at the same time that you're creating the image, the projection or the sound, you know what I mean? So as opposed to bringing it to a specific existing location. So in my head, it was always going to balance no matter what. But how we worked it out, again, it was maybe it was a little too easy. I don't know. It was a little, maybe we'll see what happens. But it was everything. There were plans and ideas, but you never really knew. I mean, he was confident in what he was doing in our discussions. I was confident in my ability to put anything up in space. Like that wasn't a concern. So it seemed to work. So it wasn't like I never felt like the times of tension and how you're going to do it. Now we adjusted things, that definitely happened. No, this needs to be here. This needs to be here. That's not working. So I mean, the lighting, everything moves around the space as we were doing it. But as far as conceptually, I wasn't really worried about it, and it changed. Like we got to a point, and it's like, no, we need more of this over here, and so we were never stuck. With nope, this is it. We've got X amount of lights. They've got to be here. This has got to be there. We kept moving stuff around up until the last day or two beforehand. It was like, oh, we can change this, and okay, yes, let's put that up there. So like I say, I think just because to me, for myself, the fields of work that were so different anyway, that it was always going to be able to balance out.
David,
Yeah,
any thoughts
I totally agree with Jason. We exchanged a few sketches. Jason did some rough sketch to see how like the cement bags are going to fit and how the rest of the space is going to flow. And at one point, since we were so into talking about the top, on the left side of the room, there was supposed to be like a huge flow of the top coming out from the cardboard. But then when I started to see the structure coming up, Jason looked at me and was like, "So how do you see that one flowing through?" And I was like, "I don't think we need it." I don't think we need it anymore because it might be too much. And that was great because as the as we started as Jason started from the right part of the when you enter, and as we went like counterclockwise, things just actually took place, and the decision was easy to just take out some of the ideas that we had because the piece was already saying so much. Although everything wasn't up yet, everything, all the projections wasn't finished, but we had a sense that okay, yeah, there's something working already in the architecture of this inner landscape, if you can call it like that. So yeah, yeah, I don't have much to say on that part because the fact that we were able to work for 2 weeks, full time every day, even over the weekends, had a whole made a whole difference, and the fact that Jason actually started way ahead than I arrived was also something quite important because he already scoped out technical issues that he had to resolve in hanging things and secure them and stuff. Because if we came and we only had like a few days, I'm not sure. I know it would have been good, but I'm not sure it would have been like this. Um, this sort of fusion that we managed to create. So balancing out everything were we actually for me, we created it as if it was a painting, in a sense that we were coming back and forth. Like, when you paint and you stop for a while, look at the painting, and you come back and you continue working on it. That's basically the movement that we had in space every day. Each morning when we came, we were like talking about what we think we are going to do. And then we were like looking at the piece. Jason will leave. I will come out, go back, come back in. And each time it's just as if it's just, okay, actually, during the lunch break, for instance, during the lunch break, we will be in the space, eating in the space, but talking about a lot of things other than work. And then you look back and you're like, oh, but I think that basically maybe um, the small top that we wanted to put, maybe we should put like a bigger one. It makes more sense. So I really had the impression of building uh, inner landscape and build it as if I was a painter, adding certain elements, removing them. Like Jason would hold like the blue tops and like, is this a good size for you? And I'll do like a test of projection on it. And it's like, maybe you can do it a bit bigger or smaller. If we already planned everything and the size of everything, maybe it wouldn't have been that like balanced out. We actually built every aspect of things as we were making it. Um, so that helped a lot to shape this sensory balance. To talk about the sensors also, it was important to have something that's fairly easy to set up when I'm not there, that you guys can actually continue, and that um, be proven over 6 months, because the public doesn't realize that having an interactive piece like this mean that you need to have people that actually come to check to see if everything is working well every day on a daily basis, and that sometimes that shows off certain commission works that I don't get accepted to because they're afraid of that aspect, that the piece has to run on their own and there's no one to actually turn it off or turn it on or maintain it. And what's good with the National Gallery is that your staff also took part of the building of the piece, because sometimes when we were building, we were actually talking with the technicians sometimes about certain things, and the answers they gave or the reflection or the story they told us about something that we were talking about during lunchtime, for instance, actually for me influenced the piece in a whole at its own also.
Balance with even within the environment of like, hey, we're here. We can only reach that far with something, or we,
Yeah.
yeah, I love that.
Yeah, because I think one of the things that stood out to me in um, just the process, like the actual um, making of the work and the setting up and watching everything and being part, is also the fact that like in a lot of ways you guys were like in a mini residency. you know, because you had to like walk in, get your coffee, you know, things like there were elements that
On it.
were yeah, there were elements that were made. It wasn't necessarily like you could just put this up and then call the artist and be like, hey, the work is up. Like you guys had to been like engaged, right? And troubleshooting things and figuring out lighting and that sort of thing. So I agree, like in a lot of ways, it is the making of the painting. It is the drawing of the lines and like you said, like Jason getting up on a ladder and figuring out like where things position because it's not a pre-packaged thing, right? Um, as some installations are, this one isn't. In terms of like the organic nature and just the spacing and everything else. Um, and again, like just touching back on like that aspect of like the balance, like I think um, it came out like pretty well. I think it's a strong work in terms of the actual showing in terms of like engaging with people. And as like the curator, I think when I saw people's engagement, I'm like, yeah, that's it.
Right.
You know, outside of like everything else, like the engagement being what it was, I feel like was one of the biggest kind of like pulls, I think, for people to be able to engage in that way. And for those who aren't aware, like at this time, there's also another exhibition across the wing, which is very different from this show. Is in you're not supposed to touch anything, right? So it's like the duality of having to come from that space and go to the other space. It makes you appreciate what's actually happening in both ends. Like one is essentially you actually engaging in a very detailed way, a very different way. You're reading, you're like contemplating ideas and everything. And in here, it's more like engagement. And then you actually kind of like have this reflective moment, like what did I just experience? Even from a sensory aspect, right? Coming into this dark space, having to go outside. Because I've seen people come back in and out. Because they like go downstairs and they're like, what's that upstairs? And then they come back because they're like, what just happened, right? So yeah, I think in a lot of ways, like everything you guys touched on kind of flows into thinking about, and you guys touched on like the last question that speaks to what is the hope you have for viewers to like carry after leaving the exhibitions, especially in terms of everyday relationships with the landscape. I know when we talked about the initial like concept for the show and thinking about your practices and thinking about the elements you were bringing, the biggest thing that stood out to me in our calls and studio visits and me looking at webcams and seeing things in the background and asking what's that, what's this, is this element of like everything kind of connecting back to the landscape, to the land, the fact that we live in this region and even outside of the region from a diasporic kind of like aspect, like we're always calling back to land, whether it's like something that we carry within us, something that we as tactile that we go to, even in David coming here and thinking like if that wasn't the first time you've come to New Providence or the Bahamas, but just the similarities between like in the region, like the housing schemes, the way things are built, thinking about import, export, and just being able to get things, and even the struggles with that, like having to export things internationally, and so thinking about that, what at the end of the day is the most important thing for you guys in people leaving this exhibition? Like if there was one thing for both of you that you wanted people to have this like takeaway moment with, like what would it be?
For myself, it's that everything is transient. Nothing that you're dealing with or living through or in is going to hold forever. And again, that's like the contrast of the the materials, the use of the car, you know, how I see people living in it. It's my shipping. It's super strong. It can be destroyed with water. So I mean, just everything's transient. The light, literally light and sound that David is producing all over the place. I mean, I understand from physics that it's there. I know it's a physical aspect and it's an energy wave at the same time. So it's like, you know, grapple with that. But just everything is just so transient, and you just have to be paying attention to and hopefully understanding. I'm still trying every day and I get it wrong half the time, you know, of am I understanding, am I doing enough? Or, you know, I spend too much time sitting and looking and trying to figure it out, and it's like, I think I got it, and that's 3 days late, and everything's already moved on, and now it's not working out. But I just like, you know, one of my biggest things was for people to just kind of make sure you see around you and make sure that you are looking, that your world is one thing and everyone else is experiencing something else. They're sauntering around, and that you make sure that you're at least able to look at it. Not necessarily help, but at least try not to harm, but at least acknowledge and notice everything else that's going on around you.
And David,
Um,
any?
for me, I think I I love the public to remember, no matter where they come from, or to become aware of that the landscape holds memory, um, that the landscape holds memory, that the landscape holds history, that the ground that we walk on commonly within the islands has energy, vibrations, sometimes the remains of our ancestors also. Um, so with this piece, even as it's connected to the whole Caribbean, the broader world problems and flux and transportation, I think I would like them to have like a more personal connection to themselves, to their history, to their past, um, and that I hope that this piece could actually help with that type of awareness through seeing things from nature, macroscopic things like the butterflies, the coadita bush, we call it here, coadita trees, the pink flowers that we see all over the region, so that actually we all realize that we are the bearers of the memories to come. So it's just as if I would like them to realize that this sort of experience can be like our future ancestral sort of memory um, experience.
Okay. And with that, we end like the main segment to the talk, and we have like a couple questions. So I'm gonna start with the first one. So yeah, so is there something you learned from other artists that you see yourself applying to your own work?
Oh, from each other? Yes. I'm going to let him do all the technological stuff. No, you learn, I think any artist would learn from every artist you see around. I definitely learned a lot from David, quite a bit. I am very interested in, especially the mapping process on a smaller scale. It also taught me to fear it. We talked about that, you know, where it's like, that reality of, hey, you walk away from that, and like if it doesn't work, then everything's not looking the way you want it to be. But I mean, yeah, I learned from every artist that's out there, like on physical, on, you know, on, do I want to try this technique? You know, how would you incorporate it in your own work? It has nothing to do with my work, but you'll always, you know, and this is just on the actual physical technical aspect. You might try a little bit of something, and then maybe you find a way for that to work into some of your other mediums, or maybe it's just the way people, you know, present things as far as the idea. It just helps you kind of look. But you learn from artists. You learn from everybody. You learn from the guy crossing the street. You know, it's like I think you as an artist, you have to just pay attention to everybody, and you should be learning from just everything around you.
Yeah, I learn a lot from Jason since my work is virtual. It's not like physical as I would like it to be. It would be easier to be collected in that sense. But I learned a lot from Jason in the way of handling the project also, since he has a huge experience in working with teams, schedules, and stuff. The way that he actually vision the process of how we are going to like install within the days before my arrival and stuff. So that was important because as someone that work alone, it's not always easy to have like an exterior vision of things, a bird's eye vision of things to know how to manage them before getting there. So that's always a part of the struggle that I have working in my studio on larger projects. Is like, okay, I know what I need to do, but sometimes I need like an exterior um, a point of view to help navigate more into things. And yeah, after working with him, I really would like to create more physical pieces, probably using also uh, we call it in French resin. I forgot the name in English. Yeah, but those liquid things that could incorporate objects or shapes or even maybe lights in them and create like a sculpture and stuff. So yeah, it was really inspiring. And but what I really retain is mostly the mindedness to like exchange, to like have an equal conversation, because that's not always easy to find in the artistic ego egoic world. And I really enjoy that part working with Jason also.
The people love the interactive part of Double Dutch. It creates a totally different atmosphere. Um, and I mean, I've been at the gallery for a while. I'm not gonna say how long. It feels like forever. But like in all of the years I've been here, I feel like engagement, especially um, like even the kids' tours, like the tours of the kids that come through, and they realize like, oh, I could engage this. Like you could see there's a level of like, I don't want to say like relief or awe or there's sudden like something like kind of like drifts away and they tend to be more like, oh wow, like even at Fuse, which is interesting because this kind of like burst out of that kind of like you know
Absolutely.
like the artists coming together, you meeting David and everything. We had like an installation where people had to like dig in this box, and just that simple engagement for people was like like changing their whole kind of like moving through the space and approaching the booth and stuff like that. So even from that coming to this, I could see how that has like um, and maybe in a lot of ways, maybe we could owe that to just generally social media, this like participation, like people wanting to engage like everything, not just like artwork, but everything and have some meaningful contribution. Um, and I think that allowed this exhibition allowed for that. And again, like there's been pieces where maybe you put on the headphones, like maybe you like touch a screen, but not to the level of this, you know.
I grew up going to, museums as a kid. So it was always like, that's a thing. That is a thing. You go on summer vacation, you go to the museum. You're in a new place, where's the museum? Because that's what you do. And it's exciting and you learn something. And so you automatically go with that intent. I think this piece worked, and what the hope was that it would get anybody and everybody like you say, intrigued enough to where then as the National Art Gallery, you then have the ability to, with the programming, to be like, all right, these kids are right up in this, you've got their attention, and it makes it easier to start talking about the broader, not to say all art is fantastic and all the programming works, but it was like the hope was that this would really get some of them in, like, okay, kids who would not necessarily be that interested, or people that would not necessarily be that interested. It's like, at least get that little glimmer into them and be like, all right, now what is this? Explain this to me, and then see, to transition that. So that was a hope with that.
It's interesting because, like, we got like the opposite to what you sometimes normally get when people come to an exhibition. So for instance, especially like the mood of the show, you walk in, the lights are dim, and at least the ambient lights are dim, but like the actual projection lights are going, and it kind of like pulls you into the space. People often, and we have like text outside, but people often come into the space and like go through everything, and then they're like, what did I just see? Like, that kind of way. And as they come out, like the text is on the wall. So oftentimes I see people coming out and then reading, and then going like shaking their head and like kind of like engaging, which is, and to compare the show across the way and even downstairs, like the text is there, like they're engaging it while they're like looking through and wanting that before. But in here, you actually have to experience the work and engage with the work before you have any context really, which in a lot of ways probably is the better way to approach it, because I feel like a lot of persons' reactions was organic, right? And I know even with some people engage in the last one and seeing like the actual like loop of videos with Hurricane might be triggering, but in that moment it's almost like you are engaging it and you could step off at any moment, which is not the reality.
Right.
Literally not your reality outside of that interaction. So it's all these elements that I in all the months that the show has been on and interacting with people, that I've even been contemplating and thinking about, even from you guys making the work and being a part of the process, that I'm still thinking about, and which I think is amazing in its own right. That the piece is engaging in all these different ways and these different aspects that come out.
I mean, a big part of it too was that it is experimental. I mean, like you say, we had a plan. We both have been working for decades in our directions, and so reasonably we knew that this was going to work. But there was always like, oh boy, if certain things didn't come. I remember that we were worried about getting the cardboard back from another show, and through forces unseen, and it was, well, what's plan B? It's like, there is no plan B. We don't have time. We don't have time to cut that again. But the thing was, you work through that, but at the end of the day, it was so experimental for us. Yes, you knew it was gonna work. But it's the fact that it is also transient. That in a few more months, or in another month, then that's it. And it's not going to. It's not going to be able to be boxed up and rehung somewhere else, because it's done. It's going to get taken apart, and that's it. It's over. It's not coming back up like that. Which is just kind of a thing with that. But
It's interesting because even in you mentioning the whole like what they call it, first world problems, right? It's like thinking of this cardboard that you essentially kind of like upcycled, like in a lot of ways, and gave another purpose, right? To become art. And I'm thinking of it also in the way that you could just take canvas, paint on canvas, and all of a sudden this thing is valued worth thousands, and like that kind of transformative kind of aspect is like being an alchemist and like making something out of nothing. And then just thinking about the fact that you did this cut up this cardboard, send it somewhere else, right?
Well, so the original version was
Yeah.
for Fuse 2025 for all of we and Bahama. Here's all the cardboard. Here's the studio space and the opportunity, to put that all together. So yeah, it was originally designed for one thing. We then, I guess, upcycled it twice.
Yeah.
Well, now this would have been the third time. Then it went somewhere else in
Yeah.
another version, and then back out here.
But not just in that aspect, but the fact that it's been transformed into this thing, because it is cardboard.
Right.
It is this material that you could find everywhere, but you transformed it so it's no longer just cardboard in the
Cardboard.
sense that
Right.
you're not doing this again. In terms of for the show, it had to come. Like you're saying,
Right.
like there's no plan B
No,
kind of thing.
there was no.
Which is interesting because in terms of thinking again about shipping and waiting on this thing now that has now become precious
Yes.
in its evolution, it's just, even that fact is just interesting to me in that process. And like again, even thinking about the technology aspect with David and work troubleshooting and having like the best the best of the best, and the best of the best is not compatible with yesterday's stuff. So it's crazy how like all of these things and thinking about the region and also access. One of the things that kind of jumped out at me in like the procurement of things for this exhibition, thinking behind the scenes, is the fact that even things being region locked. Like, oh, you could get this thing, but not in your region. And you have to, bypass this and do this. Or even technologies, even they being the latest and greatest, not working with each other simply because of like codec and all these different things. So like all of these things kind of jumped out in the show, and thinking from a logistical aspect, it made me realize why like having stuff like this is so much of a undertaking, right? I think David spoke to it too in terms of the technical aspect, the fact that we're still in a region that has power outages like regularly, and like one thing goes off and this thing is like the whole thing is off basically.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's just thinking about all these things and how they mirror with not just the work, but again, the region, the everyday, and just the realities of, again, living in this space, and we're at like 7:30 in, and I think we covered like basically everything. I don't know if you guys have any more like things you want to touch on in terms of like the work or any comments. I know one of the things that I that we probably could touch on like as a closing closing remark from both of you is like, again, thinking about this work, because this is again like different from what you normally, like your normal practice is, right?
It is.
Yeah, like in terms of like a new kind of like iteration and
Yeah, it started, like you say, with originally at Fuse, where John Cox had said, hey, I'm giving you this opportunity here. That started this particular that avenue. But working with David, then it became a whole completely different. That went. They started going in a roundabout. Like, wow, this is amazing. You can do anything. So. Yeah, this is a completely different avenue. I have sketches in my studio now and the startings of a few little mock-ups. I've slightly told him, I haven't showed him about the mock-ups, but it's like, hey, by the way, I'm working on this so that sometime in the future we can do, if you want to do something, I'm working on this physical aspect that is intended to be able to accommodate his work. It doesn't have to have it, but it's like, this would be the physical piece, but if his work was involved, it would become something completely different. So, it was definitely a change, in practice.
Yeah, so I
I'd
like
like to,
with that comment, like what I was engaging was the fact that like both of you, like a lot of people would see this show, especially for this region. I could say maybe internationally, a lot of audience are more acclimated to like this type of work, especially thinking from a highly conceptual lens. But for both of you in the work that it's like material, the use, it's not just painting, it's not paint on canvas or like sculpture in a traditional sense, or even installation in a traditional sense of, especially in the space, like something that is easily boxed and packaged, quote unquote funny, right? Boxed and packaged. To send somewhere else, like how do you think that this is encouraging to other kind of emerging artists who essentially are not taking the traditional paint on canvas or sculpture route? Like I know David has spoken about it in his practice in terms of like navigating that, as this being something that you primarily do. Um, do you have any like encouraging words for young artists who are like going into that route? Because like again, I've seen the high school kids, I've seen younger persons come in and like engage in a way that I don't think they've probably engaged before. So is there something you could tell them that is like gonna force them, or not force them, encourage them to like, if they're thinking this path in their practice, like how they could go forward in that?
I would like to add something about the experimental aspect of things, and it also answers part of your question also. Being labeled as an experimental artist in our region is a bit like negative. My experience has not been the best and positive because it's not necessarily about the technology or the cost of things. It's mostly the word experimental. The word experimental, at least in the French Caribbean islands, I can only speak for those. Um, I will have people that basically will tell me on a weekly basis that they are waiting until I update my practice, that I move on to something else to actually engage with me. And I'm like, whoa, I've been searching on this for like 25 years. It's not as if I just picked up something. I hired someone to do something. I've been learning the skills and still struggling in learning the skills all the time. So I've noticed that if in the work you don't have like something related to identity, the black body, um, post-colonial issues, I'm labeled as experimental, and this means that in many shows I'm not invited to because the visuals of the work are not necessarily reflecting what most of my um, fellow artists are actually showing like work. Sometimes it's abstract, or I go from something that's figurative and give it this abstract dimension because that's the way it comes to me. So I I wouldn't be the best person to give an advice for someone that's actually looking to go into this sort of experimental field because you need to be committed. You need to be a bit delusional, believing it actually when no one does, because on the everyday basis you feel that you're an outcast, that people don't understand what you're doing. They're not actually interested. They will be interested in the technology or the playfulness of things, but in the layers of knowledge or the layers of research that's behind of it, they don't get it really. So I hope that this piece can actually encourage new generations to say, oh, okay, um, this is an installation, but it's not in the classical meaning of the installation, which doesn't have any issue, but that it can be something that's evolving. And I even told Jason at one point, I think that was really early on in the show, I was like, you imagine that the piece we created it this way, but before the end of the show, we came back and modified something to show that this is actually really the ground and the foundation of the piece is experimentation. But that doesn't mean that by experimentation it's not finished, in a sense that it's not thought of, it's not like conceptualized, but it's just that it's a reflection for me of our island flux. That's what I like with interactivity, is that it reflects our ongoing struggles, our ongoing uh, individual quests, by having the piece evolve and morph with time. And that's the aspect that I would actually encourage the younger generation to look at that. But it might be a hassle on a daily basis in our region, because they won't sell work, they won't have commission works. Now and again, they may get a grant or succeed in a grant, but yeah, it's challenging. But when I see this type of collaboration and the support that we got from the NAGB and the whole team, I'm like, wow, it's been 25 long years, but it's worth it sometimes, even though you feel that you're exhausted a bit faster than others. Um, but yeah, so I would be careful of the word. I would like to be able to help give a more positive understanding of the word experimental in our region, because my experience doesn't like really reflect anything that's um, in the work is positive, but in the conception of those that receive it is like there's something. Maybe it's not the right word, and a word should be invented. I'm not sure, but yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean I thank you for your words, because even though you're saying you're not the best person, I feel like you're the best person to speak to it, right? Especially for someone who's been doing it for so long, and has the expertise and the troubleshooting aspects of like the use of the material. Um, and like in thinking about that, I want to say like I don't think anybody who's come through this space experienced the work as like experimental, or like feeling like things were, you know, in the purest sense of the word. It feels like grounded. It feels like a practice, like years of experience and putting this to that. Because I could tell you, like, you know, I was like, yeah, do this and do that, but like obviously, you knew the material, you knew the software, you knew how things would work together and how best to make it happen, especially with the interactive part. And it's interesting because one of the things that's close to my heart, as some of the things you touched on, is thinking about the diaspora, thinking about our region. I think we have to like kind of like hold the fort in a lot of ways, not to use like the colonial kind of like term, but hold the fort in terms of making sure this type of work is viewed in the region, you know, because oftentimes people have to leave the space to exhibit this type of work. So people here, especially people who don't, you know, because you take for granted like there are people like in the region who don't leave the region. So most of the time their engagement is only, you know, 2D, and you know it's very limited. So I think oftentimes it's up to us and institutions like NAGB, and creating access, you know, for collaborations like this to happen, to get people to, or give people space to engage work like this. And I think, you know, slowly but surely, I think that would kind of break away kind of like these stereotypes of traditional media, or even like breaking terminologies down, like people understanding fine art versus, you know, different forms of creating and making, especially in the spaces that we inhabit, and just engaging people on the whole, because we still have people trying to get, not trying to get people, but getting new generations of Bahamians to engage, especially the NAGB, um, and just like the region as a whole, like thinking of, the practice of making, the practice of exhibiting, the practice of critical thinking, especially when it comes to artwork and artwork like this, um, in a way that people, you know, in the future don't are not surprised with what they're seeing, engaging but not necessarily like um, questioning whether or not it is art or art that is beautiful or essentially aesthetically, this thing that you could engage with, just similar to how people look at a painting and it's like, this is beautiful. People engage this work and had that same feeling, sometimes with the confusion because they're like this is not a painting, but it is, Um, and yeah, I know it's been, we've talked about like everything, and then so I want to close and say like, it was great working with you guys. I think like in terms of the double dutch I've worked on several double dutches. This one being one of the ones that I solo curated, and I think one of the main things that it's many different things I wanted this show to come out like with in terms of like engagement, but one of the things I really wanted was for the artists to engage with each other, and I kind of touch base here and touch base there, but I really wanted you guys to kind of have that ability to create and explore and kind of like think about ideas. So I was really happy for that. I was really happy with the fact that you guys worked together so well. It was interesting as at one point I was just like, oh, the three bald head guys, like, like in this space, like, because I think someone had a picture with us just standing up looking, and it was just like, wow, it was like all three of us are, these bald head guys like try to do this, all the lights shining on it. So I was happy for that moment to be able to allow you guys to be able to create and explore kind of like this work, and I'm happy to hear that there's like possibilities for collaboration in the future. Um, and I think, yeah, I'm just happy that this was able to come together, and obviously the overwhelming support from NAGB,
Absolutely.
and my director, and everything else, and being able to kind of be like, okay, let's make it happen, like.
Because I know in the beginning it was a little touch and go. You had a little extra work because we couldn't forthcome with a perfect plan and explain everything clearly, right? Because we talked about that while we were working on it with several people, and it was just we had the vision verbally between, like, we had that connection quickly, just being able to talk, and it's like he works so hard in his practice, I am in my studio working all the time. So when you put that much time into your own thing, you know how to communicate to each other. So it was just that interesting part. So I do want to thank them for tolerating that up until the last minute of where is it going to be? And then all of a sudden the last 5 days, it really started to shine. It was like, okay, good. We feel it. That was enjoyable.
Yeah. And yeah, so with that, I think we've reached the end of our talk, and for everybody, the show is gonna be up for roughly another month or so. So in that time, we want people to come out, engage the work, and be able to, give us your feedback. I've had a lot of verbal feedback from persons, but do feel so inclined to send us an email, send us and then both the artists are contactable. Like, you could contact them through their socials, websites, emails as well. Like, really engage us with your thoughts about the show and any takeaways that you may have. Yeah. So thank you for joining us. Again, I'd like to thank Jason and David.
Thank you, sir.
And yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Yep. So with that, we are ending, and again, this recording should be available for everybody who didn't get a chance to tune in on our platforms, and just look out for that if you want to share it amongst your community as well. So, thank you.